Hi everyone, Comic Reviewer here, this time reviewing on Spider-Man 2. Now, as you know, Spider-Man 2 is a 2004 American superhero film that was directed by Sam Raimi, who also did the 2002 film Spider-Man, and was pretty much the next entry into the Spider-Man films, which is meant to take place 2 years after the events of Spider-Man. Now, the premise of the film is meant to be about Peter Parker, who is trying to balance his life as Spider-Man and is trying to, keep his life afoot. And you can kind of tell that Peter does try to keep his job afoot. You can kind of tell that people do give him crap, but you can kind of tell Peter still tries to balance his life. And you can kind of tell that some of the people in Peter's life aren't really bad guys, because, yeah, Mr. Assis expects Peter to be a bit responsible at his job. You can kind of tell Dr. Connors expects Peter to be on time and be an A student. And you can kind of also tell that, as well, that Peter's landlord expects Peter to, pay his share of the rent. These are people who expect from Peter. So, of course, we see also how Peter still deals with some of the after effects from the first film, like Harry still bitter about Spider-Man, thinking he killed his father. We see how MJ and Peter still have feelings for each other, but it becomes clear that MJ slowly falls in love with someone else, and Peter wants to try and put that thing back together. And what's actually interesting is you can actually still tell that Harry and MJ still try to be friends for Peter's sake, but you can kind of tell Harry still sees MJ as his Valkyrie. And we are introduced to Dr. Octavius. Now, I think what makes Dr. Octavius interesting is that he does become a friend and a mentor to Peter, as well as showing basically his project known as the Sun, as well as his mechanical arms. I think what makes Octavius work as a character is that he has goals and ambitions, much like Harry, but lets it get in the way of things, because much like how Harry wants to become something like his father, Otto believes his project's going to work without doing any pre-testing. And you can kind of tell his wife Rosie soldiers on with him, as she still sees a lot of potential in him. But of course, it becomes his downfall. And we see how Otto wants to recreate the project under the tentacles or the harness's influence. And you can kind of tell that Otto's not really a bad guy. He's just a person wanting to recreate his project without seeing the same consequences. And we also see how Peter's life starts to become unbalanced, and we see how he starts to lose his powers. And this is a metaphor to how stress, anxiety, and also trying to balance our lives can affect us. And this does remind me of Steven Universe Future, where once Steven tried to balance his life in Future, he became unstable. The point of Peter losing his powers is a metaphor. When he was trying to managing his life, he feels a bit more trying to gain it. But once his life starts to lose control, you can kind of tell he starts to become a bit more weaker without his powers. It slowly starts to fade. And originally I thought this was hint at the Man-Spider as a kid, but this is a metaphor that Sam Raimi is trying to say, that sometimes balancing your life can sometimes lead to a bad outcome. And I also do feel, as well, is that the film does have two important messages. One is about not letting goals and ambitions cloud your judgment, and don't let it get the better of you. And the second one is trying to balance your life carefully, as sometimes it can lead to a bad outcome. And I think what's also interesting is that we got a series of memes thanks to this movie, like the Pizza Time one, and yeah, the YouTube videos are flooded by them. And I also do feel what was interesting is that we are going to see Alfred Molina again as Dr. Octopus in the third Marvel Cinematic Spider-Man movie. The same with Jamie Foxx. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they can bring. So I think in general, they do have an important message, and they do balance it well. It's a moment where you can tell Peter tries to bring his life back together, and it's a moment that Aunt May tries to play the mental, hinting she becomes aware of Spider-Man. So I think this movie deserves 2 thumbs ups. Definitely good, and definitely a perfect entry. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.